The air hung heavy with the smell of rain and static as Dakota Lawson rode her chestnut mare across the vast Wyoming prairie. The year was 1876, and the territory was still wild and untamed, much like Dakota herself. Her golden hair was tied back in a practical braid that whipped against her back as she urged her horse faster, eyeing the darkening sky with growing concern. Dakota had left her family's failing ranch 3 days prior, determined to reach Cottonwood Springs before supplies ran completely dry back home. At 22, she carried the weight of responsibility for her ailing father and younger siblings on her shoulders, a burden that had grown heavier since her mother's passing 2 winters ago. "Come on, Maple," Dakota whispered to her mare as thunder rumbled in the distance. "We need to find shelter before this storm breaks." The plains stretched endlessly before her, tall grass rippling like ocean waves under the strengthening wind. Dakota had grown up in this territory, knew its beauty and its dangers intimately. The approaching storm wasn't simply an inconvenience, it was potentially deadly. Lightning flashed, closer this time, illuminating the landscape in stark white. Dakota counted 1, 2, 3 before the thunder crashed. Too close, much too close. Maple snorted nervously beneath her, sensing the danger. As Dakota scanned the horizon for any sign of shelter, she spotted a small outcropping of rocks about a half-mile ahead. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only option in sight. She dug her heels into Maple's sides, urging the tired horse forward just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. They were still a quarter-mile from the rocks when disaster struck. Lightning split the sky with a deafening crack, striking the prairie grass directly in Dakota's path. In an instant, the dry grass ignited, flames spreading with terrifying speed. Maple reared, nearly throwing Dakota from the saddle. "Easy, girl," Dakota shouted, fighting to control the panicked animal. The fire spread in a semicircle before them, cutting off their path to the rocks. Dakota pulled hard on the reins, turning Maple to ride parallel to the flames, searching for a way around. But the wind was against her, pushing the fire faster than Maple could run. Within moments, they were nearly surrounded, the heat intense against Dakota's skin. Maple's eyes rolled white with fear as smoke began to cloud the air. "Help!" Dakota screamed, though she knew it was futile. No one would be out in this storm. No one would hear her over the thunder and the roaring flames. She was alone. Then, as if summoned by her desperate cry, a figure emerged from the smoke, a rider on a powerful black stallion, bandana pulled over his nose and mouth. Without hesitation, the stranger rode straight toward her, navigating his horse through a narrow gap in the flames. "Take my hand," the man shouted, extending his arm as he brought his horse alongside hers. Dakota hesitated only a moment before reaching for him. His grip was strong and sure as he pulled her from Maple's saddle onto his own horse. Dakota had just enough time to grab Maple's reins before the stranger spurred his stallion forward, charging through the narrowing gap in the flames. Dakota clung to the man's waist, feeling the heat of the fire singeing her clothes as they raced through. Maple followed, terrified but unwilling to be left behind. The stranger leaned low over his horse's neck, urging the animal to greater speed. For several heart-stopping moments, Dakota was certain they wouldn't make it. Then suddenly, they were through, the fire still raging behind them but no longer encircling them. The rain began to fall in earnest now, but it would be some time before it doused the prairie fire completely. The stranger didn't slow until they'd put significant distance between themselves and the flames. Finally, he reined his horse to a stop near a small creek swollen with rainwater. "You all right, miss?" he asked, turning to look at her over his shoulder. Dakota nodded, still breathless from their escape. Now that they were safe, she took her first good look at her rescuer as he pulled down his bandana. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 25, with striking blue eyes set in a tanned, weathered face. A thin scar ran along his jawline, and dark hair curled damply at his collar. "I'm Samuel Sinclair," he said, dismounting and offering a hand to help her down. "Most folks call me Sam." "Dakota Lawson," she replied, taking his hand and sliding from the saddle. Her legs trembled beneath her, partly from fear, partly from the exertion of riding hard. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Sinclair." "Sam," he corrected, a slight smile softening his serious expression. "And it seems like poor timing to be out riding alone, Miss Lawson." "Dakota," she returned, matching his informal address. "And I didn't exactly plan to be caught in a lightning storm. I'm trying to reach Cottonwood Springs." Sam's eyebrows rose. "That's still a good day's ride from here, even in fair weather." The rain continued to fall steadily, soaking through Dakota's clothes. She shivered, suddenly aware of how cold she was despite the lingering heat of the fire. "We need to get you somewhere dry," Sam said, noticing her discomfort. "There's an old trapper's cabin not far from here. It's not much, but it'll keep the rain off until this storm passes." Dakota hesitated. Going to a remote cabin with a strange man wasn't exactly wise, but neither was catching pneumonia in the rain, and he had just saved her life. "I don't have much choice, do I?" she said, retrieving Maple's reins and checking the mare for injuries. Finding none, she looked back at Sam. "Lead the way, Mr. Sam." Sam nodded, remounting his stallion. "Follow me, and stay close. There's more lightning coming, and we don't need another fire to escape." They rode in silence for nearly 20 minutes, the rain relentless as they picked their way through the prairie toward a small copse of trees. As they drew closer, Dakota could make out a small log cabin nestled among the trees, almost invisible until they were nearly upon it. "It's not much," Sam said as they approached. "Belongs to an old trapper I do business with sometimes. He won't mind us using it." The cabin was indeed modest, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn furniture, and a narrow bed pushed against one wall. But it was dry, and at the moment that was all Dakota cared about. Sam took care of the horses, leading them to a small lean-to at the side of the cabin while Dakota stepped inside. The interior was surprisingly clean, if dusty. Dakota found a stack of firewood beside the hearth and set about building a fire, grateful for the mundane task to occupy her still shaking hands. When Sam entered, rain dripping from his hat and coat, the small fire was beginning to catch. He hung his hat on a peg by the door and set his saddlebags on the table. "You're handy," he commented, nodding toward the fire. "I've been taking care of myself and my family for some time now," Dakota replied, standing and brushing dust from her hands. "Building a fire is one of the easier tasks." Sam regarded her thoughtfully. "You said you're headed to Cottonwood Springs?" Dakota nodded. "My father's ranch is failing. We need supplies, and I'm hoping to find work. The general store owner, Mr. Hoffman, is an old friend of my father's. He might hire me. It's a long journey to make alone." "I didn't have much choice," Dakota said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "My father's too ill to travel, and my brother and sister are too young." Sam held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I wasn't judging, just making an observation. Takes courage to set out like that." Dakota's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you for understanding, and for the rescue." Sam smiled, and Dakota was struck by how it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and bringing warmth to his eyes. "I couldn't very well ride past and leave you to the flames, could I?" "Some might have," Dakota said quietly. Sam turned away, rummaging in his saddlebags. "I've got some jerky and hardtack. Not much of a meal, but it'll keep your strength up." They shared the simple food, sitting on opposite sides of the small table as the storm raged outside. Dakota learned that Sam was a horse trader, returning from business in Cheyenne and heading for his small ranch near, of all places, Cottonwood Springs. "Seems we're headed the same way," Dakota observed, taking a sip from the tin cup of coffee Sam had brewed. "Seems so," Sam agreed. "You're welcome to ride with me, if you'd like. Safety in numbers out here." Dakota studied him, weighing the offer. She'd been raised to be cautious around strangers, especially men. But there was something about Sam Sinclair that inspired trust. Perhaps it was the straightforward way he spoke, or maybe it was simply that he'd risked his own life to save hers from the fire. "I'd appreciate the company," she said finally. Sam nodded, seemingly pleased with her decision. "We'll set out at first light, assuming the rains stopped by then." The storm continued through the night, lightning occasionally illuminating the small cabin in sharp flashes. Dakota took the bed at Sam's insistence, while he made do with a bedroll on the floor. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully to Dakota, her mind replaying the terror of being surrounded by fire, followed by the relief of Sam's arrival. She woke at dawn to find the storm had passed, leaving behind a clean washed sky and the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth. Sam was already awake, tending to the horses outside. "Morning," he greeted her as she stepped outside, blinking in the bright sunlight. "Sleep well." "Well enough," Dakota replied, stretching muscles sore from yesterday's hard ride. "How soon can we leave?" "Soon as you're ready," Sam said. "I filled our canteens and packed up. The trail will be muddy, but passable." Within the hour, they were riding side by side across the prairie. The fire had left a large black scar on the landscape, but already Dakota could see tiny green shoots pushing through the charred earth, nature's resilience at work. As they rode, Dakota found herself studying Sam when he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about the quiet horseman, a steadiness that was reassuring after her recent ordeal. He wasn't what she'd call handsome in the conventional sense, but his features were striking, and there was a kindness in his eyes that drew her. "You keep looking at me like I've grown a second head," Sam commented after catching her gaze for the third time. Dakota felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm still trying to make sense of yesterday. If you hadn't come along when you did." "But I did," Sam interrupted gently. "No use dwelling on what might have been." "Is that your philosophy on life, Sam Sinclair? Don't dwell on the past." A shadow crossed his face. "Something like that." They rode in silence for a while after that, Dakota sensing she'd touched on something painful. It was nearly noon when Sam spoke again, pointing to a distant smudge on the horizon. "See that? It's a trading post. We can rest the horses there, maybe get a hot meal." The trading post was a rough establishment, primarily serving trappers and the occasional stagecoach passenger. The proprietor, a grizzled man named Jenkins, greeted Sam with familiarity. "Sinclair, didn't expect to see you back so soon. And with company, no less." His gaze raked over Dakota with undisguised interest. "Miss Lawson is traveling to Cottonwood Springs," Sam said, his tone cool. "We're just stopping for a meal." Jenkins raised an eyebrow but made no further comment, leading them to a small table in the corner of the room that served as both store and dining area. A Native American woman served them bowls of stew and cornbread, the first hot food Dakota had eaten in days. "This is delicious," Dakota said after her first bite. "I was beginning to think I'd have to survive on jerky until Cottonwood Springs." Sam smiled. "Jenkins's wife is the best cook in the territory. It's the real reason travelers stop here, not his charming personality." Dakota laughed, the sound surprising her. It felt good to laugh after the tension of the past days. Their meal was interrupted by the arrival of three men, trail dusty and loud. They ordered whiskey at the counter before taking a table near Sam and Dakota. One of the men, a broad-shouldered fellow with a patchy beard, kept glancing their way, his gaze lingering on Dakota longer than was polite. "Ignore them," Sam murmured, noticing her discomfort. "They're just passing through, same as us." But as they finished their meal, the bearded man approached their table, swaying slightly from the effects of the whiskey. "Well now, ain't you a pretty little thing?" he said, leering at Dakota. "What's a nice girl like you doing with the likes of Sinclair?" Dakota stiffened, but before she could respond, Sam was on his feet, positioning himself between Dakota and the drunk. "We're just leaving," Sam said, his voice level but with an undercurrent of steel. "No need for trouble." The man snorted. "No trouble, just being friendly." He peered around Sam at Dakota. "What do you say, sweetheart? Want some real company?" "I'm quite satisfied with my current company, thank you," Dakota said coolly, standing and gathering her belongings. The man's face darkened. "Stuck-up bit," his words were cut off as Sam grabbed his shirt front, pulling him close. "That's enough," Sam said quietly. "The lady's not interested. Walk away." For a tense moment, Dakota thought the man would throw a punch. His two companions had half risen from their table, watching the confrontation with interest. Then Jenkins appeared behind the counter, a shotgun in his hands. "Take it outside if you're looking for a fight, boys," he called. "I just replaced the windows last month." The bearded man glared at Sam, then shrugged off his grip. "Not worth it anyway," he muttered, retreating to his table. Outside, as they mounted their horses, Dakota gave Sam a sidelong glance. "Does that happen often?" "What? Men behaving like idiots around beautiful women? I'd say it's fairly common." Dakota felt her cheeks warm at the casual compliment. "I meant men picking fights with you specifically." He seemed to know your name. Sam's expression closed off. "I've been in this territory a long time. Made some friends, made some enemies." After a pause, he added, "Not all my past dealings were entirely legal." Dakota raised her eyebrows, waiting for him to elaborate, but Sam merely clicked to his horse and started down the trail. Dakota followed, curiosity piqued by this glimpse into Sam's past. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they moved away from the open prairie toward more varied terrain. Rolling hills gave way to scattered stands of cottonwood and aspen, and the trail began to follow a meandering creek. "We'll camp here tonight," Sam announced as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. He nodded toward a sheltered spot near the creek. "Good water, and those rocks will block the wind." As they made camp, Dakota found herself watching Sam with new eyes, wondering about his cryptic comment. What had he meant by not entirely legal? Was he a former outlaw? He certainly didn't seem dangerous, at least not to her. Over a small campfire, as they ate the last of the trading post's cornbread with coffee, Dakota decided to ask directly. "Earlier you mentioned your past. Were you an outlaw, Sam?" Sam looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled his expression. "Would it matter if I was?" Dakota considered this. "I suppose that depends on what kind of outlaw, and whether you've left that life behind." Sam was quiet for so long that Dakota thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he set down his coffee cup and met her gaze. "I rode with the Harper gang for 2 years, he said, his voice low. "We robbed stagecoaches, mostly. Never killed anyone, though not for lack of trying on some of the boys' parts. I left after a job went wrong and a passenger got hurt, a young woman. Not much older than you." Dakota absorbed this information, studying Sam's face in the firelight. "And now I raise and trade horses," Sam said. "Legitimate business. I've been straight for 3 years. Even returned some of the money, anonymously." "Why are you telling me this?" Dakota asked. "You could have lied." Sam shrugged. "You asked. And I don't much see the point in lying to someone who's trusting me to guide them safely to Cottonwood Springs. Dakota nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty. Does it change your opinion of me? Sam asked, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. I'm not sure I had formed a solid opinion yet, Dakota replied. But I believe people can change. My father always says it's not where you start but where you finish that counts. Sam's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Your father sounds like a wise man. He is, Dakota said softly. That's part of why I'm making this journey. I can't bear to see him lose everything he's worked for. As the fire burned down to embers, they shared more of their stories. Dakota told Sam about her mother's death from influenza, about her father's declining health, about her 16-year-old brother trying to be the man of the family and her 12-year-old sister who still cried at night for their mother. In return, Sam spoke of growing up an orphan, raised by a series of reluctant relatives until he was old enough to strike out on his own at 15. He described how he'd fallen in with the Harper gang, attracted by the sense of belonging as much as the promise of easy money, and how hollow that life had ultimately felt. The woman who was hurt, Dakota said as they prepared to sleep, Sam again insisting she take the only bedroll while he made do with his saddle blanket. What happened to her? Sam's face was in shadow as he answered. She lived, but her face was scarred from the glass of the stagecoach window. I visit her once a year, leave money with her family. They don't know it's me, of course. Dakota was silent, imagining the weight of that guilt. That's why you pulled me from the fire, she said suddenly. You're still trying to make amends. Sam looked up sharply. I pulled you from the fire because you needed help. It wasn't some act of penance. I didn't mean, get some sleep, Dakota. Sam cut her off, his voice not unkind but final. We've got a long ride tomorrow. Dakota lay awake long after Sam's breathing had deepened into sleep, thinking about the complex man who had saved her life. There was more to Sam Sinclair than met the eye, layers of pain and regret beneath the calm exterior. And despite herself, Dakota found she wanted to know more. The next morning brought clear skies and easier travel. They made good time, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat. By mid-afternoon, Sam pointed to a rise ahead. From the top of that hill, we'll be able to see Cottonwood Springs, he said. Dakota felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Their journey was almost over. Soon she would be in town, seeking work at Mr. Hoffman's store, and Sam would continue to his ranch. There was no reason their paths would cross again, except perhaps occasionally in town. The thought troubled her more than it should have. At the crest of the hill, they reined in their horses. Below them, Cottonwood Springs spread out in the valley, a modest collection of buildings straddling the stage route. Dakota could make out the church steeple, the larger form of the hotel, and the scattered houses and businesses that made up the town. There it is, Sam said. Your destination. Dakota nodded, unable to summon much enthusiasm. Yes, thank you for guiding me here safely. Sam turned in his saddle to look at her, his expression unreadable. What will you do now? Find Mr. Hoffman as I planned. Ask for work. Send money home to my father. Dakota recited her plan without conviction. What about you? Where is your ranch? Sam gestured to the northwest. About 5 miles that way. Small place, but good pasture for the horses. They sat in silence for a moment, both seemingly reluctant to make the final descent into town. Dakota, Sam began, then stopped. Yes, she prompted when he didn't continue. Sam shook his head. Nothing. We should get going. It'll be dark soon. They rode into town as the afternoon shadows lengthened. Cottonwood Springs was busier than Dakota had expected, with wagons and riders moving along the main street and people going about their business. Sam led her directly to the general store, a large building with a covered porch at the front. "This is Hoffman's," Sam said, dismounting and tying his horse to the hitching rail. He came around to help Dakota down, his hands warm and strong at her waist. For a moment, they stood close, Dakota looking up at Sam, aware of his proximity in a way she hadn't been before. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, and Dakota thought he might say something. Instead, he stepped back, releasing her. "I'll see you get settled before I head to my place," he said, his tone businesslike. Inside the store, they found Mr. Hoffman, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, arranging a display of canned goods. He looked up at their entrance, his eyes widening in recognition. "Samuel Sinclair, back from Cheyenne already?" His gaze shifted to Dakota. "And who might this young lady be?" "This is Dakota Lawson," Sam said. "Thomas Lawson's daughter, from the Double L." Mr. Hoffman's face lit up. "Thomas Lawson? How is that old scoundrel? I haven't seen him in, 3 years?" "He's been better, sir," Dakota said. "That's partly why I'm here. Our ranch is struggling, and I've come seeking work. My father said you might have a position available." Mr. Hoffman's expression sobered. "I'm sorry to hear Thomas is unwell." As for work, he glanced at Sam, then back to Dakota. "I don't currently have a position open, Miss Lawson. My niece arrived from back east last month and has been helping in the store." Dakota felt her hopes sink. "I see. Thank you anyway, Mr. Hoffman. Is there anyone else in town who might be hiring?" Mr. Hoffman scratched his chin thoughtfully. "The hotel might need help. Mrs. Davenport runs a respectable place, and with the cattle drives coming through, they're always busy." Dakota nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Thank you. I'll inquire there next." As they left the store, Dakota's steps were heavy. The hotel might hire her, but the pay would likely be less than she'd hoped for at the general store. "I'm sorry about that," Sam said as they stood on the porch. "Would you like me to accompany you to the hotel?" Dakota shook her head. "No, thank you. You've done more than enough already. I'm sure you're eager to get home after your travels." Sam didn't deny it, though something like indecision flickered across his face. "Where will you stay tonight? The hotel is expensive if you're looking to save money." Dakota hadn't thought that far ahead. "I suppose I'll have to take a room at the hotel, at least for tonight." "I have another suggestion," Sam said after a moment's hesitation. "My ranch house has a spare room. You'd be welcome to stay there while you look for work. No charge." Dakota stared at him, surprised by the offer. "That's very generous, but it wouldn't be proper," Sam finished for her, a rueful smile tugging at his lips. "No, I suppose it wouldn't. Forgive the suggestion." Dakota found herself oddly disappointed by his quick retreat. "It's not that I don't trust you," she clarified. "It's just that you don't need to explain," Sam interrupted. "It was presumptuous of me to offer. The hotel will be fine for you." He glanced at the darkening sky. "I should be going if I want to reach my place before full dark." "Of course," Dakota said, feeling as though something important was slipping away from her. "Thank you again, Sam, for everything." Sam nodded, his expression once again unreadable as he mounted his horse. "Take care of yourself, Dakota Lawson. Perhaps I'll see you around town sometime." And then he was gone, riding away down the street without looking back. Dakota watched until he turned a corner and disappeared from sight, a strange hollowness opening inside her. The hotel did indeed have a position available chambermaid, with quarters provided in the attic and meals included. The pay was modest but steady. Dakota accepted gratefully, though the thought of being so far from her family weighed on her. That night, lying on the narrow cot in the small attic room, Dakota found her thoughts returning to Sam. In just 3 days he had gone from stranger to, Not quite a friend, but something. Someone who had saved her life, shared his past with her, guided her safely to her destination. Someone she wasn't ready to say goodbye to. Dakota settled into her new position at the hotel, learning the routine of changing linens, sweeping floors, and assisting the cook when needed. Mrs. Davenport was strict but fair, and the work, while exhausting, allowed Dakota to send most of her wages home to her father. A week passed then too. Dakota made a few acquaintances in town but no real friends. She caught herself scanning the street whenever she had a moment to look out the window, hoping for a glimpse of Sam Sinclair, but he never appeared. It was nearly a month after her arrival in Cottonwood Springs when Dakota finally encountered Sam again. She had been sent to the general store with a list of supplies for the hotel and was just leaving, arms laden with parcels, when she nearly collided with someone entering. "Pardon me," she began, then stopped as she recognized Sam. He looked different, cleaner, his hair trimmed, wearing a new shirt and no trail dust. For a moment, he seemed as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Dakota," he said, recovering first. "You're still in town?" "Yes," she replied, adjusting her grip on the packages. "I found work at the hotel." "So I heard." Sam reached out to take some of the parcels from her. "Let me help you with those." "Thank you." Dakota relinquished half her burden, acutely aware of how her heart had accelerated at the sight of him. "I haven't seen you in town before today." "I've been busy at the ranch," Sam explained as they began walking toward the hotel. "Spring is a busy time with the new foals." Dakota nodded, searching for something else to say. "How are your horses?" "Good. Healthy. I've got a new mare that's showing promise." Sam glanced at her. "How is the hotel work?" "It's fine. Tiring, but Mrs. Davenport is fair." Dakota hesitated, then added, "I've been able to send money home to my father." They reached the hotel all too soon. Sam handed over the packages, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. "Thank you for the help," Dakota said, reluctant to end their brief encounter. Sam nodded, stepping back. "My pleasure." He was turning to leave when Dakota spoke again, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. "Would you like to have supper with me sometime? As a thank you for saving my life." Sam paused, surprise evident on his face. Then a slow smile spread across his features, transforming him. "I'd like that very much, Dakota. When are you free?" "Sunday afternoon," Dakota said. "I have a few hours off then." "Sunday it is," Sam agreed. "I'll come by at noon." As he walked away, Dakota felt lighter than she had in weeks, a small smile playing at her lips as she carried the packages into the hotel. Sunday arrived clear and warm, a perfect late spring day. Dakota had traded shifts with another maid to ensure she had the afternoon free and had spent her meager savings on a new ribbon for her hair. She waited on the hotel porch, nervousness fluttering in her stomach as noon approached. Sam arrived precisely on time, riding his black stallion and leading a chestnut mare that Dakota recognized with delight. "Maple!" she exclaimed, hurrying down the steps to greet her horse. "How did you—" "I rode out to the livery stable the day after we arrived," Sam explained, dismounting. "Bought her from the owner. I thought you might want her back someday." Dakota stroked Maple's nose, deeply touched by the gesture. "That was incredibly thoughtful of you, Sam." Sam shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "She's a good horse. Seemed a shame for her to be sold off to a stranger." Dakota turned to him, impulsively reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Thank you, truly." Sam's fingers curled around hers, warm and calloused. "You're welcome." After a moment, he added, "I thought we might ride out for our supper, if that's all right with you. I know a nice spot by the creek." Dakota nodded, letting go of his hand to mount Maple. "That sounds perfect." They rode at a leisurely pace, leaving the town behind and heading into the rolling hills that surrounded Cottonwood Springs. The prairie was in full bloom, wildflowers dotting the landscape in splashes of color. Sam led them to a shady spot beside the creek, where cottonwoods provided relief from the sun and the water bubbled over stones. He'd brought a picnic fried chicken, cornbread, and apple pie, all carefully packed in a basket. "Where did you get all this?" Dakota asked as she helped spread the blanket he'd brought. "Made it myself," Sam said, then grinned at her skeptical look. "All right, Mrs. Potter at the cafe made it. But I did the asking and paying part myself." Dakota laughed, settling on the blanket. "It looks delicious, regardless of who made it." They ate companionably, talking about small things: the weather, the town gossip, the progress of Sam's horse breeding program. It was only when they'd finished the pie and were sipping coffee that Sam broached a more serious topic. "I've been thinking," he said, setting down his cup, "about your situation." Dakota raised her eyebrows. "My situation?" "Your family's ranch," Sam clarified. "You said it was failing, that your father was ill." "Yes," Dakota said slowly, unsure where he was going with this. Sam looked out at the creek, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've been doing well with my horses. Well enough that I've been looking to expand, maybe buy some cattle." Dakota waited, still not seeing his point. "What if," Sam continued, turning back to meet her eyes, "I were to offer a partnership to your father? My horses, his cattle experience. Combined land." Dakota stared at him. "You want to partner with my father? You've never even met him." "No," Sam acknowledged. "But I know his daughter, and that tells me something about the kind of man he is." Dakota's throat tightened with emotion. That's incredibly generous, Sam." "But why would you do that?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because I can't stop thinking about you, Dakota Lawson. Because ever since I pulled you from that fire, you've been in my thoughts day and night. Because I rode into town today, hoping to find the courage to tell you that I think I'm falling in love with you." Dakota's breath caught. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. Yet as the words sank in, she realized it wasn't entirely a surprise. Perhaps she'd known, somewhere deep down, that the connection between them was more than just gratitude or friendship. "Sam," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Sam assured her quickly. "It's too soon, I know that. We barely know each other. But I wanted you to understand why I'm offering to help your family. It's not charity. It's because I want a chance to know you better, to see if what I'm feeling might be something you could feel too, someday." Dakota looked at this man who had saved her life, who had shared his past with her, who had thought to buy her horse back in case she wanted it someday, who was now offering to help her family without asking for anything in return except the possibility of a future. "I think," she said slowly, reaching across the blanket to take his hand, "that I would like that chance very much, Sam Sinclair." The smile that spread across Sam's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie, full of warmth and promise. He squeezed her hand gently, then raised it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Then we'll take it one day at a time," he said. "No rush, no pressure. Just two people getting to know each other." Dakota nodded, her heart full. One day at a time. 3 months later, Dakota stood on the porch of the ranch house, not Sam's ranch house anymore, but the new, larger one built on the combined property of the Sinclair-Lawson Ranch Partnership. Her father sat in a rocking chair nearby, his health improving steadily under the Wyoming sun and the lighter workload the partnership afforded him. In the corral, Sam was working with a young horse, his movements confident and gentle as he guided the animal through its paces. Dakota watched him, a smile playing at her lips as she remembered their journey to this point. There had been challenges, of course. Her father had been skeptical of Sam at first, particularly when he learned of his outlaw past. But Sam's honesty and his clear devotion to Dakota had eventually won Thomas Lawson over, and the partnership had flourished. Dakota's siblings had taken to ranch life with enthusiasm, her brother apprenticing with Sam in horse training, her sister blossoming in the freedom of the open spaces. And Dakota herself had found a new purpose, managing the ranch accounts and discovering a talent for breeding stock selection that complemented Sam's training abilities. As for her relationship with Sam, it had grown steadily, built on mutual respect and deepening affection. Their first kiss had come on a summer evening much like this one, as they rode back from checking fence lines. Sam had stopped his horse, reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, and then leaned in, his lips gentle against hers. Since then, there had been many such moments, quiet conversations by the fire, shared laughter over meals, comfortable silences as they worked side by side. Dakota had fallen in love with Sam Sinclair not in a single dramatic moment, but in hundreds of small ones, until she couldn't imagine her life without him. As if sensing her thoughts, Sam looked up from the corral and caught her eye. He smiled, that same sunrise smile that never failed to warm her from the inside out, and Dakota smiled back, raising her hand in a small wave. Later, as the evening star appeared in the darkening sky, Sam joined Dakota on the porch. They stood side by side, watching as lightning flickered on the distant horizon, a summer storm brewing, but far enough away to be merely a beautiful display rather than a threat. "Do you ever think about that day?" Dakota asked softly. "When the lightning struck the prairie grass, and you pulled me from the flames?" Sam slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her close to his side. "I think about it every day," he admitted. "How different my life would be if I hadn't been riding that trail at that exact moment." Dakota rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to believe everything happened for a reason. Then my mother died, and I couldn't see what reason there could possibly be for that kind of loss. But now, Sam prompted when she trailed off. "Now I think perhaps she was watching over me that day," Dakota said, "guiding you to me when I needed help most." Sam pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Then I owe her my thanks for the greatest gift of my life." Dakota turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become the center of her world. "I love you, Sam Sinclair." "And I love you, Dakota Lawson," Sam replied, his blue eyes reflecting the first stars of evening. "More than I ever thought possible." As he lowered his head to kiss her, Dakota knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged, not just on this land or in this house, but in the arms of this man who had saved her in more ways than one. From the flames of a prairie fire to the uncertain future she had faced, Sam had pulled her clear and shown her a path to happiness she hadn't dared to imagine. And as the distant lightning illuminated the sky, Dakota Lawson silently thanked whatever forces had brought them together that stormy day on the Wyoming prairie, setting in motion a love that would burn bright and steady for all their days to come.